The equipment room smelled like gun oil and decades of sweat. 5 men stood in a semicircle, their shadows stretching across concrete walls painted the color of military monotony. Outside, the North Carolina sun beat down on Fort Bragg with the kind of intensity that made men grateful for air conditioning and cold beer. Inside this room, there was neither. The door opened. A woman stepped through. She was small, maybe 5'4" on a good day. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, olive green t-shirt, standard issue BDU pants, and boots that had seen some miles but weren't broken in enough to suggest years of service. She carried a green duffel bag over one shoulder and a folder of papers in her other hand. She looked lost. That's what the 5 men thought anyway. The largest of them stepped forward. Victor Moreno, 6'5", 260 pounds of muscle built through years of punishment that would break ordinary men. They called him Tank, not because he drove one, because he looked like one. "Equipment rooms restricted," Tank said. His voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "SEAL candidates only." The woman didn't look up from her paperwork. "I'm looking for storage unit B7. My transfer orders say it's assigned to me." Ryan Blackwood laughed. He stepped out from behind Tank, all 6'2" of blonde-haired confidence. His father was General Marcus Blackwood, 4 stars, the kind of man who had senators on speed dial and could end careers with a phone call. Ryan wore that privilege like a second skin. "Transfer orders," Ryan repeated, his voice dripping with amusement. "Sweetheart, this isn't the admin building. You want the main complex 3 buildings over. Someone probably sent you to the wrong place." "I'm exactly where I need to be." The woman's voice was level, calm. She still hadn't looked at them. Derek Huang shifted uncomfortably. He was the smallest of the 5, the tech specialist who always had his phone out, always recording. Something about this woman bothered him. The way she stood, the way she held herself, like she was waiting for something. "Listen," Marcus Webb said, stepping forward. He was the diplomatic one, the peacemaker. "We don't mean to be rude, but this area is off limits. We're in the middle of pre-qualification review. If you need help finding—" "I don't need help." She finally looked up. Her eyes moved across each of them, one by one, measuring. "I need storage unit B7. It's assigned to me. Are you going to move, or do I need to move you?" The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Ryan's smile disappeared. Nobody talked to him like that. Nobody challenged him. His whole life had been doors opening before he reached them, people stepping aside, making way for the son of General Marcus Blackwood. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me." She set her duffel bag down slowly, deliberately. "I have work to do. You're in my way." Tank took a step closer. His shadow fell across her like a storm cloud. "Little girl, you need to learn some respect. This is a SEAL facility. You don't belong here." "Is that so?" It wasn't a question. Ethan Cole stood against the back wall, watching. He was 21, the youngest of the group, and something in his gut told him this was going wrong. The woman wasn't backing down, wasn't showing fear, wasn't reacting the way people usually reacted when Tank got in their face. She was waiting. "Last chance," Tank said. "Walk out that door on your own, or I'll carry you out." The woman tilted her head slightly. "You're going to put your hands on a superior officer?" Ryan burst out laughing. "Superior officer? You're not even wearing a uniform. You look like someone's girlfriend who wandered into the wrong building." "My name," the woman said quietly, "is Sarah Mitchell, Chief Petty Officer, Combat Designation Classified. I have 6 years of operational experience across 3 continents in missions that officially don't exist. My father was Colonel Robert Mitchell, Special Operations Command, killed in action Panama, 1989. She paused. "And in about 10 seconds, every single one of you is going to wish you had walked away." Tank moved first. He was fast for a big man. His right hand shot out, aiming for her shoulder, planning to grab her and physically remove her from the room. A lesson in respect. A reminder of where she stood in the hierarchy of Fort Bragg. His hand never connected. What happened next took exactly 12 seconds. Sarah sidestepped Tank's grab with minimal movement. Just enough. Her left hand caught his wrist, twisted, used his own momentum to pull him forward and off balance. At the same time, her right palm struck upward, catching him under the jaw with precisely calibrated force. Tank's head snapped back. His eyes went unfocused. Sarah pivoted, using his body weight to swing him around and drive him face first into the concrete wall. The impact sounded like a side of beef hitting a butcher's block. Tank dropped to the floor, unconscious. 2 seconds elapsed. Ryan was still processing what he just witnessed when Sarah's boot caught him in the solar plexus. Not a kick, a precision strike, aimed at the cluster of nerves just below the sternum. The kind of blow that doesn't break bones but makes breathing impossible. Ryan doubled over, gasping. His hands went to his chest, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Sarah grabbed his right wrist, twisted it behind his back, and applied upward pressure to the joint. Not enough to break, just enough to make it very clear that breaking was an option. Ryan screamed. 4 seconds. Derek Huang fumbled for his phone, trying to get the camera recording. This was insane. This was impossible. A woman half Tank's size had just put him on the ground like he was nothing. Sarah's elbow connected with Derek's solar plexus before he could press record. Same strike she'd used on Ryan. Same result. Derek dropped to his knees, phone clattering across the floor, his lungs suddenly refusing to function. 6 seconds. Marcus Webb tried to run. It was the smart play. Get out, get help. This woman was clearly some kind of trained killer. This was beyond anything they could handle. Sarah caught him by the collar, spun him around with surprising strength, and swept his legs. Marcus hit the concrete hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He lay there stunned, trying to remember how breathing worked. 8 seconds. Ethan Cole pressed himself against the wall, hands raised. I wasn't going to. I know. Sarah stood in the center of the room, breathing normally, not even winded. Around her, 4 men lay groaning on the floor. You stood there and watched. You did nothing. I'm sorry. I should have. You should have spoken up. You should have stopped them. Sarah's voice was cold. You're not as guilty as they are, but you're not innocent either. She looked down at Ryan, who was cradling his hyperextended wrist, tears streaming down his face. For the record, Sarah said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I'm Chief Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell, Combat Advisor, Classified Operations Specialist. I'm here on special assignment, and I don't need permission from trainees to access my assigned equipment. She turned to Ethan. You get one chance. Remember how it felt to stand there and do nothing. Remember how it felt to be a coward. Then decide who you want to be tomorrow. Sarah picked up her duffel bag, stepped over Tank's unconscious body, and walked to storage unit B7. She opened it with a key from her pocket, deposited her gear, and closed it again. Then she walked out, leaving 5 men broken on the floor. 12 seconds. Master Chief William Bull Torres was reviewing training schedules when his office door burst open without a knock. Petty Officer Jackson, one of the facility coordinators, stood in the doorway, pale and breathing hard. Master Chief, Equipment Room B, 5 candidates down, 1 unconscious. Medical's been called. Bull was on his feet before Jackson finished the sentence. He was 58 years old, built like his nickname suggested, with the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years of military service. Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, the first Gulf War that had just ended a month ago. He'd seen things that would break most men. But this was Fort Bragg. This was supposed to be safe. Who attacked them? That's the thing, Master Chief, Jackson swallowed. It was a woman, just one woman. Witnesses say she took all 5 of them down in seconds. Bull felt something cold settle in his stomach. What woman? New transfer. Chief Petty Officer Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell. The name hit Bull like a physical blow. Mitchell. Robert Mitchell. Panama, 1989. Bull had been there, had seen what happened, had watched one of the best soldiers he'd ever known get cut down by people who were supposed to be on his side. And now Robert's daughter was here, at Fort Bragg, on the same base where the man who killed her father walked free. Get medical to that equipment room. I'll handle this personally. Bull moved through the corridors of Fort Bragg with purpose. His mind was racing. He'd read the transfer orders when they came through last week. Sarah Mitchell, combat advisor. Most of her file was redacted, blacked out with a kind of classification that meant she'd been doing things the government would never acknowledge. But he'd recognized the name immediately. He'd known this day would come eventually, had known that Robert Mitchell's daughter would follow in his footsteps, that she would end up in special operations, that someday, somehow, she would find her way to the truth about what happened in Panama. He just hadn't expected it to be today. The equipment room was chaos. Medical personnel were loading Tank Moreno onto a stretcher. The big man was conscious now but groggy, a massive bruise forming on his jaw. Ryan Blackwood was screaming about his wrist, about lawsuits, about his father making everyone pay. Derek Huang sat against the wall, holding his ribs, his face pale. Marcus Webb was being checked for a concussion, and Ethan Cole stood in the corner, alone, looking like he wanted to disappear into the concrete. Bull scanned the room. No sign of Sarah Mitchell. "Where is she?" he asked one of the medics. "The woman? She left. Walked out about 10 minutes ago." Bull turned to Ethan Cole. "You, what happened here?" Ethan's voice was quiet, ashamed. We confronted her, told her she didn't belong here. Tank tried to grab her, and then she defended herself." "It wasn't defense, Master Chief. It was..." Ethan struggled to find words. "It was like watching a professional, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. 12 seconds, that's all it took." Bull looked around the room. 5 of Fort Bragg's SEAL candidates put on the ground by a woman half their size. "Anyone press charges?" Ryan Blackwood's head snapped up. "Damn right we're pressing charges. That psycho attacked us." "My father's going to..." "Your father," Bull interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of authority, "is going to hear about how 5 grown men assaulted a female superior officer in a restricted area. There are security cameras in this room. I'm going to review that footage personally, and if it shows what I think it shows, you'll be lucky if assault charges are the only thing you have to worry about." Ryan's mouth opened, then closed. Bull turned to the medics. "Get them patched up. Then I want written statements from each of them. No collaboration, individual accounts." He walked out, leaving the chaos behind. Bull found Sarah Mitchell exactly where he thought he would. The outdoor range, 2 miles from the main complex. Old-school shooting facility with paper targets at distances ranging from 100 to 800 yards. The kind of range that didn't need computers or electronic scoring, just rifles, ammunition, and skill. Sarah stood at the 500-yard mark, prone position, rifle pressed to her shoulder. Bull watched from a distance as she fired. 1 shot, pause, breathe. 2nd shot, methodical, controlled. He walked closer, his boots crunching on gravel. Sarah didn't look up, but he knew she'd registered his presence. Operators like her always did. "That's Robert's rifle," Bull said quietly. Sarah fired another round. "He left it to me. M24 sniper weapon system. Your father was one of the best long-range shooters I ever served with." Bull moved closer, studying the weapon. 7.62 NATO, Remington 700 action. Leupold Ultra M3, a 10-power fixed scope. Maximum effective range 1,200 yards in the right hands. Your father could make shots at distances that seemed impossible. Finally, Sarah looked up. Her eyes met his. There was recognition there. Not of him personally, but of what he represented. You knew him. I served with him. Panama, '89. I was there when... Bull stopped. Even after all these years, saying it out loud was difficult. I was there when he died. Sarah sat up slowly, rifle still in her hands. She ran her fingers along the weapon's stock, touching the small scratches and wear marks that told the story of years in the field. Then you know. Know what? That it wasn't the enemy who killed him. Bull's jaw tightened. Around them, the North Carolina afternoon was quiet, except for the distant sound of training exercises. Somewhere, men were running obstacle courses. Somewhere, instructors were shouting. The normal rhythms of Fort Bragg continued, oblivious to the conversation happening on this forgotten shooting range. Your father was a good man, Bull said carefully. One of the best soldiers I ever knew. But some things are classified, Sarah. Some things are buried for a reason. My father uncovered something in Panama, something that got him killed, and the people responsible are still walking around free. Sarah's voice was steel. I'm not here by accident, Master Chief. I didn't request transfer to Fort Bragg because I wanted a change of scenery. Bull studied her face. She looked so much like Robert. Same eyes, same determination, same stubborn refusal to back down when she knew she was right. You know who killed him, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Bull was silent for a long moment. Then finally he nodded. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Hayes. He was a major back then, part of the Panama operation. Your father found evidence that Hayes and several other officers were facilitating weapons sales to the cartels. Not military equipment, private sales. They were using military operations as cover for smuggling. How much? Millions. Maybe tens of millions over the course of several years. Bull sat down on a wooden bench nearby. The weapons were supposed to go to Allied forces. Instead, they ended up in cartel hands. M16 rifles, M60 machine guns, crates of ammunition, even some Stinger missiles. Your father traced the serial numbers, found the bank accounts, built an airtight case. Sarah's grip on the rifle tightened. And when my father found out, he tried to report it through proper channels, but Hayes had friends, high-ranking friends, including a certain general who's now on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Marcus Blackwood. Bull raised an eyebrow. You've done your homework. I've spent 2 years piecing together what happened, following paper trails, tracking money, interviewing anyone who would talk to me. Sarah stood up, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. My father's death wasn't an accident. It wasn't collateral damage. It was murder. I know. And you did nothing. The accusation hung in the air between them. Bull took a deep breath. I was a sergeant, 28 years old. I saw what happened to your father when he tried to speak up. And I was a coward. I convinced myself that reporting it wouldn't change anything, that I'd just end up dead too. So I kept my mouth shut and lived with it for the last 2 years. He looked directly at Sarah. Not a day goes by that I don't regret that decision. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, Hayes is here, at Fort Bragg. He's the training commander, oversees all SEAL qualification programs. Convenient. Very. Bull crossed his arms. Sarah, whatever you're planning, I'm not planning anything. I'm here as a combat advisor. That's my official assignment. And unofficially? Sarah's smile was cold. Unofficially, I'm going to find evidence that proves Hayes murdered my father. And then I'm going to watch him spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Bull nodded slowly. That's a dangerous game. Hayes has protection. General Blackwood makes sure of that. The general's son just tried to put his hands on me. I heard, 12 seconds, they said. 11, actually, I rounded up. Despite himself, Bull almost smiled. Your father would be proud and terrified. Will you help me? The question was direct. No dancing around it. Bull thought about Panama, thought about watching Robert Mitchell bleed out in a warehouse, while Frank Hayes stood 30 feet away, smoking a cigarette, making sure no help arrived. Thought about the last 2 years of living with that memory. Yes, he said, but we do this smart. Hayes is paranoid. He survived this long by being careful. If he even suspects you're investigating him, he'll either have you transferred out or he'll kill me too. Yes. Sarah adjusted the rifle on her shoulder. Then we make sure he doesn't suspect anything. We'll need evidence, real evidence, not just testimony from an old sergeant with a guilty conscience. Bull stood up, his knees creaking. Financial records, communication logs, witness statements, the kind of evidence that can't be ignored or explained away. I have some already. Bank transfers from a Cayman Islands account, shipping manifests that don't match official records, 3 witnesses who were in Panama and are willing to talk. 3? Who? Former Sergeant James Reynolds. He handled logistics, saw the weapons being diverted firsthand. Sarah counted on her fingers. Lieutenant Maria Santos. She was intelligence. She helped my father document the transactions. And you, Master Chief Torres, you were there. You saw what happened. Bull felt his chest tighten. I can't testify, not officially. It would end my career. I'm not asking you to testify, not yet. I'm asking you to help me gather enough evidence that Hayes can't hide anymore, that Blackwood can't protect him anymore, that the truth finally comes out. And if we fail, then at least we tried. At least we stood up. That's more than most people can say. Sarah looked out across the range. My father taught me that warriors don't just fight enemies. They fight for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. Bull was quiet for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Your father was the best man I ever served with. It's time I honored his memory properly. Sarah shook his hand. Thank you, Bull. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Hayes won't go down without a fight. And Blackwood, that man has resources we can't even imagine. I know, but I'm ready. Are you? Because I've seen what Hayes does to people who threaten him. I've seen the bodies, the destroyed careers, the lives ruined. You need to understand what you're walking into. Sarah's eyes hardened. I've spent 6 years in operations that don't exist. I've been shot at, blown up, hunted by people who make Hayes look like a Boy Scout. I know exactly what I'm walking into. Bull studied her face, saw the same steel that had been in Robert Mitchell's eyes, the same unwillingness to back down, the same commitment to duty that transcended personal safety. All right, then let's get to work. But first, you need to know what you're up against. Hayes isn't working alone. He has a network, other officers who were involved in the Panama smuggling, politicians who received campaign contributions, contractors who facilitated the sales. It's bigger than just one corrupt lieutenant colonel. How big? Big enough that when your father tried to expose it, they mobilized assets from multiple agencies to shut him down. CIA, DEA, even elements within the Pentagon. They made it look like a cartel attack, random violence in a war zone. But it was coordinated, planned, executed with military precision. Sarah felt ice in her veins. My father never had a chance. No, he didn't. They made sure of that. Bull's voice was heavy with regret. And they'll do the same to you if we're not careful. That's why we need to be smart. We need to build our case quietly, document everything, create multiple backups. Make sure that if anything happens to you, the evidence still gets out. I have a handler, Commander Elizabeth Chen at NCIS. She knows what I'm doing. If I disappear, she'll continue the investigation. Good. But Chen is one person. We need more insurance, more witnesses, more documentation. We need to make it impossible for them to bury this. Sarah nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Starting with the 96-hour evaluation, I'll pass with flying colors. Show Hayes that I'm here to train, not investigate, lower his guard. He won't buy it, not completely, but it might give us the time we need. Bull looked at his watch. Speaking of which, you should get some rest. The evaluation starts in 18 hours. You're going to need every advantage you can get. What will Hayes throw at me? Everything. The desert phase will be designed to break you physically. GPS jamming means you'll have to navigate old school. Compass and map. Star navigation at night. Your father and I used to train together in the Mojave. I can teach you the techniques we used in Vietnam. Shadow stick method for finding true north. How to read terrain features. How to conserve water in extreme heat. Sarah smiled slightly. My father taught me some of that when I was a kid, before Panama. Then you'll have an advantage most of these candidates don't have. But Hayes will make it harder for you. Contaminated water supplies, false intelligence, obstacles designed specifically to make you fail. Like what happened to Ethan Cole. Exactly. Hayes is already trying to eliminate candidates he sees as threats or liabilities. Cole refused to fully participate in your assault. That made him a risk. So Hayes tried to kill him in a way that would look like natural causes. We need to protect Cole and any other candidates who might help us. Agreed, but carefully. If Hayes suspects we're building a coalition against him, he'll accelerate his timeline. Bull stood up. Come on, we've got 18 hours to prepare you for the hardest evaluation of your life. And while we're at it, I'll teach you everything your father and I learned about surviving in hostile territory when the people who are supposed to have your back are the ones trying to kill you. They walked together toward the training complex. The sun was setting over Fort Bragg, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere in this base, Frank Hayes was planning how to destroy Sarah Mitchell. Somewhere, General Blackwood was making phone calls, mobilizing resources, preparing his defense. But Sarah Mitchell had something they didn't account for. She had Bull Torres, a man who'd spent 30 years learning how to survive, a man who'd finally found something worth risking everything for. She had her father's legacy, the training, the skills, the unshakable commitment to truth that no amount of corruption could extinguish. And she had time. Not much, but enough to prepare, enough to plan, enough to make sure that when the moment came, she would be ready. Bull, Sarah said as they walked, there's something I need to know. When my father died, his last words, what did he say? Bull stopped walking, stood very still. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. He said, tell Sarah I'm proud of her. Tell her to be brave. Tell her that some battles choose you, and when they do, you fight, no matter what it costs. Sarah felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. He knew. He knew they were going to kill him. Yes, he knew, but he went anyway, because that's who Robert Mitchell was. A man who couldn't walk away from a fight when he knew he was right. I'm the same way. I know, that's what scares me. Bull put a hand on her shoulder. But it's also why you're going to win. Because Hayes and Blackwood, they fight for money, for power, for themselves. But you're fighting for something bigger, for truth, for justice, for your father's memory. And that kind of motivation, that's what makes real warriors unstoppable. They continued walking into the gathering darkness. Behind them, the shooting range was empty, silent. But Sarah Mitchell's shots still echoed in Bull Torres's memory. Perfect accuracy, perfect control, perfect execution, just like her father. Hayes and Blackwood had no idea what was coming for them. And by the time they figured it out, it would be too late. The briefing room held 47 SEAL candidates and 12 evaluators. Morning light cut through high windows, casting shadows across men who thought they knew what hard looked like. They were about to learn differently. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Hayes stood at the front, crisp uniform, shoulders squared, every inch the professional officer. Behind him, a projection screen showed a single line of text. Comprehensive assessment, 96 hours. Gentlemen, Hayes began, his voice carrying that particular tone of authority that came from decades of command. And lady, his eyes found Sarah in the back row. You are about to undergo the most challenging evaluation of your military careers. Sarah sat motionless, her face revealing nothing. Bull Torres stood against the side wall, arms crossed, watching everything. For the next 96 hours, you will be tested physically, mentally, and psychologically. You will operate with minimal sleep, maximum stress, and constant pressure. Some of you will excel. Some of you will fail. And some of you, Hayes paused, his gaze lingering on Sarah, some of you will discover you never belonged here in the first place. Ryan Blackwood sat 3 rows ahead of Sarah, his right wrist still bandaged. He hadn't looked at her once since entering the room. Derek Huang sat beside him, ribs taped. Marcus Webb looked straight ahead, jaw tight. Only Ethan Cole had turned around earlier, catching Sarah's eye for just a moment. Something passed between them, an understanding, an apology that words couldn't convey. Hayes continued, Phase 1 begins in 2 hours. You will be transported to the Mojave Desert Training Facility. 300 square miles of terrain that will test every survival skill you possess. Your objective is simple. Reach the extraction point before the 48-hour mark. He clicked to the next slide. Topographical map, harsh terrain, no roads, no water sources marked. You will carry standard combat loads, 50 pounds of gear, 3 liters of water, no GPS devices, no electronic navigation aids, map and compass only, old school. Hayes smiled thinly, the way warriors used to operate before computers made everyone soft. Bull Torres shifted slightly. Sarah caught the movement. This was Hayes's first move. Remove modern advantages. Force candidates to rely on skills that most of them barely possessed. But Sarah had trained with Bull for 3 days straight. Celestial navigation, terrain association, the art of finding north without a compass, using nothing but shadows and stars. Skills from an era when Bull had walked through Vietnamese jungles with nothing but a map and his instincts. Bull had taught her the shadow stick method. Plant a stick in the ground, mark where the shadow ends, wait 15 minutes. Mark where the shadow ends again. The line between the 2 marks runs east-west. The first mark is always west. Simple, effective, unchanged by technology or GPS jamming. He taught her how to read terrain features, how ridge lines ran, how water flowed, how to identify north-facing slopes by the vegetation, how to estimate distances by counting paces, all the skills that operators had used before satellites and computers. Phase 2, Hayes continued, will test your combat effectiveness, long-range marksmanship, close-quarters engagement, decision-making under fire. You will be scored on accuracy, speed, and tactical judgment. Another slide. Shooting range layouts. Target distances. Sarah recognized the 800-yard mark, the distance where good shooters became great ones, where breath control and wind calculation meant everything. Her father's rifle waited in her quarters. The M24 sniper weapon system, 7.62 NATO rounds with 168-grain Sierra Match King bullets. Muzzle velocity, 2,600 feet per second. At 800 yards, the bullet would drop approximately 220 inches. Wind deflection would add another variable. Mirage would complicate range estimation. But Sarah had spent the last 3 nights on the range with Bull, relearning lessons her father had taught her as a teenager. How to read mirage, how to calculate bullet drop, how to compensate for Coriolis effect at extreme ranges, how to become one with the weapon until shooting was as natural as breathing. Phase 3 will test your psychological resilience. You will face scenarios designed to break your decision-making capability. Stress positions, sleep deprivation, interrogation resistance. Hayes's smile never reached his eyes. We will find your breaking point. Everyone has one. Sarah remembered her father's letters from the field, his description of SERE training, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. the psychological warfare that turns strong men into broken shells. But Robert Mitchell had taught his daughter one crucial lesson. Pain was temporary, but compromising your principles lasted forever. Bull had reinforced that lesson over the past 3 days. He'd put Sarah through mock interrogations, stress positions, sleep deprivation, teaching her how to retreat into her mind, how to find the quiet place where interrogators couldn't reach, how to maintain her cover story no matter what pressure they applied. The first rule of interrogation resistance, Bull had said, is to understand that they're trying to break your will, not extract information. They want you to doubt yourself, to second guess, to crack under pressure. Don't give them that satisfaction. Find your anchor, your father's memory, your mission, whatever keeps you centered, and hold on to it no matter what. Evaluation begins at 0600 tomorrow. Dismissed. The candidates filed out. Sarah remained seated until the room emptied. Hayes was gathering his materials when she approached. Lieutenant Colonel. Hayes looked up. Up close, she could see the calculation in his eyes, the measuring, the threat assessment. Chief Mitchell, interesting performance the other day. 5 men in 12 seconds. Quite impressive. They assaulted a superior officer. I defended myself. So I've heard. The security footage supports your version of events. Hayes closed his laptop. Though I have to wonder about the level of force employed. Seems excessive for simple self-defense. I used exactly enough force to neutralize the threat. No more, no less. Hayes studied her face. You look familiar. Have we met before? Sarah held his gaze. I don't believe so, sir. Strange, I could swear. Hayes trailed off, but Sarah saw the moment of recognition in his eyes, the connection being made. Mitchell, Robert Mitchell, Special Operations, Panama. My father. I see. Hayes's expression shifted, just slightly, but Sarah caught it. The wariness, the recalculation of threat levels. I served with your father briefly. Outstanding officer. His death was a tremendous loss. Yes, it was. Silence stretched between them. Two people who knew they were enemies, still maintaining the facade of military professionalism. I look forward to seeing your performance in the evaluation, Hayes said finally. Your father set high standards. It would be a shame to disappoint his memory. I don't intend to disappoint anyone, sir. Sarah turned and walked out. Behind her, she knew Hayes was already reaching for his phone, already calling General Blackwood, already setting wheels in motion. The game had moved beyond subtle maneuvering. Now it was open warfare, and Sarah was ready. The California sun hit like a physical force, 112 degrees of dry heat that turned the desert floor into a wavering mirage. 47 candidates stood in a line, full combat gear, sweat already soaking through their uniforms. Sarah adjusted her pack. 50 pounds felt light compared to some of the loads she'd carried in operations that officially never happened. Her canteens were full. Her map was memorized. Her compass hung around her neck. Bull Torres moved down the line, checking gear. When he reached Sarah, he leaned in close. Hayes added something to the scenario. GPS jamming equipment at the extraction point. Even if someone smuggled a device, it won't work. Sarah nodded. She'd expected something like this. Remember what I taught you, Bull said quietly. The desert talks if you know how to listen. Shadow stick method for direction. Star navigation after dark. The North Star never lies. I remember. Conserve water. Most of these men will drink too fast. Panic. You stay disciplined. Always. Bull moved on. Hayes stood on a raised platform, megaphone in hand. You have 48 hours to reach the extraction point. Coordinates are on your maps. First 20 to arrive pass this phase. The rest fail and are removed from SEAL candidacy. Your time starts now. Chaos erupted. Clients bolted into the desert, desperate to get ahead, to claim those first 20 slots. Ryan Blackwood and his group moved as a unit. Derek Huang already plotting their route. Sarah didn't run. She walked to a small rise, pulled out her map, and oriented it north using her compass. The extraction point was 80 miles northeast. Rough terrain, 2 mountain ranges, a dry lake bed that would be murder in the afternoon heat. Most candidates would take the direct route, push hard, burn themselves out in the first 24 hours, and crawl to the finish line dehydrated and broken. Sarah plotted a different course, longer in distance but following terrain features that offered shade during the hottest hours. A dried riverbed that would allow faster movement, a ridgeline that would catch evening breezes and make night navigation easier. Her father had taught her that speed without intelligence was just exhaustion, that the fastest route was rarely the smartest route. She folded her map, checked her compass bearing, and started walking at a steady, sustainable pace. The sun reached its peak at 1300 hours. Sarah moved through a narrow canyon, its walls providing blessed relief from direct sunlight. She'd been walking for 7 hours, covered maybe 25 miles, and hadn't touched her second water canteen yet. Discipline, control, efficiency. She heard voices ahead, angry voices. Sarah slowed, moved carefully around a boulder, and found Ryan Blackwood's group in heated argument. "I'm telling you, the map is wrong," Derek Huang was saying. "This canyon doesn't match the topography." "Then you read it wrong," Ryan shot back. "My father used to bring me out here. I know this area." Sarah could have slipped past unnoticed, should have, but something made her stop. Maybe it was her father's voice in her head, reminding her that good soldiers helped other soldiers even when they didn't deserve it. "You're 3 miles off course," Sarah said, stepping into view. All 5 men spun around. Ryan's hand went to his sidearm before he recognized her. "What are you doing here?" His voice dripped with hostility. "Walking to the extraction point, same as you." Sarah moved closer, pulled out her map. "You're here," she pointed. "You need to be here. The canyon you're in curves west in about half a mile. You'll end up at a box canyon with no exit. You'll have to backtrack, waste 3 hours." Derek Huang looked at his own map, comparing. His eyes widened. "She's right. We missed the fork 2 miles back." "She's not right," Ryan snapped. "She's trying to throw us off, slow us down." Sarah shrugged. "Believe whatever you want. But in 6 hours, when you're staring at a dead-end wall, remember this conversation." She started to walk past them. Marcus Webb stepped forward. "Wait, why are you helping us? After what happened?" "Because getting lost in the desert is a death sentence. Because regardless of what happened in that equipment room, we're all on the same side out here." Sarah met his eyes. "And because my father taught me that you never leave people to die just because you don't like them." She continued walking. Behind her, she heard Derek say, "We should listen to her." "Absolutely not," Ryan responded. "She's playing us." Their voices faded as Sarah moved deeper into the canyon. Night fell across the Mojave like a curtain. Temperature dropped 40 degrees in 2 hours. Sarah found a sheltered spot between 2 boulders, unpacked her sleeping bag, and ate a cold MRE. She didn't sleep. Instead, she lay on her back, looking up at the stars. Her father had taught her the night sky during camping trips when she was a child, before deployments made family time scarce, before Panama took him away forever. Polaris, the North Star, constant, unchanging, the fixed point around which everything else rotated. "Find Polaris and you'll never be lost," her father had said. "Even when everything else seems confused, that star will show you true north." Sarah found it now, drew an imaginary line from the pointer stars in the Big Dipper. There, exactly where it should be. She checked her compass. Perfect alignment. At 0300, Sarah packed her gear and started walking again. Most candidates would wait for dawn, but she had memorized the terrain, knew exactly where she needed to go, and night movement meant cooler temperatures and faster progress. By the time the sun rose, Sarah had covered another 15 miles. The extraction point was 20 miles ahead. At her current pace, she'd arrive by late afternoon. That's when she heard the helicopter. Sarah looked up, squinting against the morning sun. A Black Hawk, flying low, following a search pattern. The helicopter banked, headed in her direction, then veered off toward a rocky outcrop 3 miles south. Sarah changed course, moving toward higher ground for a better view. Through the heat shimmer, she could see figures. A candidate, down, not moving. The helicopter landed. Medics jumped out. Sarah started running. 15 minutes later, she reached the scene. The medics had a candidate on a stretcher. Severe dehydration. Possible heat stroke. It was Ethan Cole. "What happened?" Sarah asked one of the medics. "Found him unconscious, empty canteens. He pushed too hard, didn't manage his water." Sarah looked at Ethan's gear. Something was wrong. She picked up his canteen, opened it, sniffed. Her blood ran cold. "This water is contaminated," she said quietly. The medic looked up sharply. "What?" "Smell it. Someone added something. Salt, maybe. Enough to make drinking it accelerate dehydration instead of preventing it." The medic took the canteen, smelled it, and his face went pale. "This is sabotage." Sarah looked toward the extraction point, toward Fort Bragg, toward Lieutenant Colonel Frank Hayes. "Get him to the hospital," she said, "and test that water. Find out exactly what's in it." The helicopter lifted off in a storm of sand and noise. Sarah stood alone in the desert, holding a contaminated canteen, realizing that Hayes wasn't just trying to make her fail. He was willing to kill to stop her. Sarah reached the extraction point at 1600 hours, 13th to arrive, ahead of schedule. Bull Torres was waiting. Cole's stable. They're running tests on his water. Preliminary results show sodium chloride, lots of it. Someone doctored his supply. Hayes. Probably, but we can't prove it. Bull handed Sarah a water bottle. "Phase 2 starts tomorrow. Long-range marksmanship. You ready?" Sarah thought about her father's rifle. "I'm ready." That evening, Sarah cleaned her father's M24 rifle with the care of a surgeon. Every component was inspected, verified, and reassembled. The scope was zeroed. The ammunition was hand-selected. Each bullet was weighed to ensure consistency. This wasn't just about passing an evaluation. This was about sending a message, about proving that Robert Mitchell's daughter had inherited more than just his rifle. She'd inherited his skill, his dedication, his refusal to accept anything less than perfection. Tomorrow, Frank Hayes would learn that lesson personally. 40 candidates stood behind 8 firing positions. The range extended 800 yards into the distance. Wind was gusting at 15 miles per hour, variable direction. Mirage was dancing across the ground. Perfect conditions for failure. Hayes stood at the command position. 800 yards, 12 shots. You will engage targets as they appear. Top 20 move forward. Chief Mitchell, you're up first. Sarah moved to firing position 1. She laid out her equipment with deliberate precision. Her father's rifle, a shooting mat, a notebook for wind calculations. Bull Torres stood behind her as the assigned spotter. Wind is 15 knots from the west, gusting to 20. Mirage is moderate. Temperature is rising. You'll need to account for thermal shift. Sarah settled into prone position. She controlled her breathing. In, out, slow, steady, heart rate dropping, the world narrowing to nothing but the target 800 yards away. "Target," Hayes called. A silhouette appeared. Sarah calculated. 800 yards. Wind from the west at 17 knots based on the Mirage pattern. Bullet drop at this distance with this ammunition was approximately 220 inches. She needed to aim 18 feet high and 6 feet right to compensate. She made the adjustment, exhaled halfway, held it, squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked. Recoil pushed against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the impact. Center mass. Perfect hit. "Hit," Bull called. Around the range, candidates shifted. That was a difficult shot. 800 yards in variable wind, and she'd made it look easy. Target, Hayes called again. Another silhouette, this one at the far left edge. Maximum wind deflection. Sarah calculated again, made the adjustment, fired. Hit. Target. This one appeared and disappeared in 3 seconds. Reaction time test. Sarah didn't think, didn't calculate, just let instinct and training take over. Aim. Fire. Hit. 12 targets, 12 shots. Hayes called them faster and faster, trying to force mistakes. Sarah hit every single one. When the final target fell, silence blanketed the range. 20 for 12. Perfect score. At 800 yards. In conditions that should have made half those shots impossible. Hayes approached, his expression carefully neutral. Impressive shooting, Chief Mitchell. That's a range record. Thank you, sir. But Sarah had seen something in his eyes. Not just anger, fear. The close quarters course was designed to simulate urban combat. Shoot houses, multiple targets, civilians mixed with hostiles. Sarah was paired with Derek Huang. Hayes gave the briefing. 6 rooms, unknown number of targets, some hostile, some civilian. You have 3 minutes. The buzzer sounded. Sarah moved through the door, rifle up, scanning. First room, 2 targets, both hostile. She engaged. 2 shots, both down. Derek followed, his movement jerky, nervous. Sarah flowed through the course like water. Each step calculated, each movement economical. She identified threats instantly, engaged without hesitation. At the final room, 4 targets appeared. 3 hostiles, 1 civilian, all mixed together. Sarah engaged the 3 hostiles in 2 seconds. Clean shots, controlled pairs. The buzzer sounded. Time, 2 minutes, 18 seconds, Hayes announced. 0 penalties, perfect score. She just set another record, and she could see Hayes's jaw tightening, his carefully constructed plan falling apart. The room was deliberately cold, 62 degrees. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Sarah sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor. She'd been sitting here for 4 hours. The interrogator was Navy psychologist Commander Patricia Raines. Let's go over this again, Chief Mitchell. Your father died in Panama. That must have been traumatic. It was difficult, Sarah said, but I dealt with it. Did you? Because you enlisted 3 months after his death, rushed through basic training, volunteered for every dangerous assignment. I chose to serve, like my father. Or you chose to put yourself in situations where you might die. Raines made a note. Let's talk about the equipment room. 5 men. You injured all of them. They assaulted a superior officer. I defended myself. You broke a man's jaw. That's not defense. That's violence. That's what happens when you attack someone with combat experience. Tell me about your father. Were you close? Sarah knew where this was going. I felt loss, like anyone who loses a parent. Just loss, not rage, not a desire to find who was responsible. My father died in combat. Did he? Because he was investigating corruption when he died. Did you know that? Sarah's hands clenched involuntarily. Barely visible, but Raines saw it. You do believe he was murdered? I believe my father deserved better. Then why are you at Fort Bragg? Why request transfer to where officers who serve with your father are stationed? The interrogation had shifted. Raines knew something. I requested Fort Bragg because it's a premier training facility. It looks like obsession, like a daughter who can't accept her father's death. I'm pursuing excellence. You're pursuing vindication. Raines stood up. I see a young woman with trauma and a tendency toward violence. Someone who needs help, not deployment. Sarah forced herself to breathe slowly. This was the play. Diagnose her as unstable. I'm fit for duty. That's not your determination. It's mine. We're continuing this evaluation for another 12 hours. 6 hours later, Sarah was moved to a different room. Smaller, darker. Temperature dropped to 58 degrees. She'd been awake for 22 hours. A new interrogator entered, Major Richard Kowalski. Chief Mitchell, we're trying something different. He placed a folder on the table, opened it. Inside were photographs. Her father, crime scene photos from Panama. Robert Mitchell lying in a warehouse, blood pooling beneath him, eyes open. Look at them. That's what happens when people make mistakes. Sarah forced herself to look away. Why are you showing me this? Because your father died because he made an error. He trusted the wrong people. My father was murdered. The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. Kowalski leaned back. Murdered. By whom? Sarah said nothing. You believe someone in his unit killed him. Kowalski pulled out another photograph. Frank Hayes, Panama era. Someone like Hayes. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Kowalski stood up. Here's the problem. You're wrong. Hayes is a decorated officer. Your father's death was investigated. You're chasing conspiracy theories. Then why are you worried about what I might find? Kowalski smiled. The path you're on leads to psychiatric discharge, a ruined career. He gathered the photographs, started to leave. Last chance. Walk away. Request transfer, because if you continue, we will break you. I understand you're scared, Sarah said quietly. I understand everything you're doing proves I'm right. Kowalski's expression hardened. 12 more hours. Hour 30. Sarah was in a stress position, standing, arms extended, holding her father's rifle at shoulder level. Her shoulders screamed, her arms trembled. Kowalski walked circles around her. How long can you hold it? Sarah's vision swam. She'd been holding this position for 40 minutes. He was carrying it when someone shot him in the back. His own people. Shut up, Sarah whispered. You're angry. Anger makes you sloppy, like your father. The rifle dipped. Sarah's arms were failing. She forced them back up. Your father died alone, betrayed, and you're going to end your career in this room. Sarah thought about Bull, about his advice, survive. But her arms were giving out. She thought about her father, about his last words. Some battles choose you. When they do, you fight, no matter what it costs. The rifle steadied. Sarah locked her jaw, locked her arms. I can hold this all day, she said. 2 hours later, they let her put the rifle down. Sarah's arms hung uselessly, but she hadn't dropped it. Hour 68. Sarah had been awake for 3 days with only 4 hours of sleep. Her body was shutting down. Kowalski sat across from her. You believe your father was murdered. You believe Hayes was involved. You came to Fort Bragg to prove it. Is that correct? Sarah's mouth was dry. I came to Fort Bragg to serve. Stop lying. We have evidence. Phone records, computer logs. You're running an unauthorized inquiry. Sarah said nothing. They'd been watching her. Your handler has abandoned you. NCIS is disavowing your activities. Then why are you still questioning me? Kowalski smiled. Because Blackwood wants to know what you know, what evidence you've gathered. The threat was clear. I don't know anything. No evidence, just suspicions. Based on what? Based on the fact that you're all so scared. Based on the fact that you've spent 3 days trying to break me. Sarah leaned forward. You're afraid because I'm right, because my father did uncover something, because Hayes did kill him, and eventually I'm going to prove it. Kowalski's expression didn't change, but something flickered. Fear. Take her to holding. The holding cell was 8 by 6 feet, concrete walls, steel door. Sarah lay on the thin mattress. She had maybe 2 hours. The cell door opened. Ethan Cole stepped through. He looked terrible. They let me out for the psych eval. I've been in interrogation 12 hours. They told me you contaminated my water. Sarah felt her stomach drop. That's not true. I know. I told them it wasn't true. He looked at her with wonder. But I didn't break. I kept thinking about what you said, about deciding who I wanted to be. He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket. So I recorded my whole interrogation. Everything they said, every threat. He handed it to Sarah. I don't know if it'll help, but I wanted you to have it. Sarah took it with trembling hands. Why? Because you showed me what courage looks like. Because I'm tired of being afraid. Ethan stood. They're coming for you soon. Hayes and Blackwood. They're going to offer you a deal. Psychiatric discharge if you agree to never speak about your father. How do you know that? I heard them talking. They think I'm broken. They don't realize I'm on your side now. Sarah looked at him, the young man who'd found his courage. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If you refuse, they're going to destroy you, and anyone who helps you. Ethan's voice was steady. But I think that's a risk worth taking. The door opened. Bull Torres stood there. Cole, out. Ethan nodded and left. Bull stepped inside. They're moving up the timeline. Hayes got word that NCIS is asking questions. He's panicking. He wants you neutralized. How long? 6 hours. Blackwood is flying in tonight. They'll convene a psychiatric review at 0600. They'll declare you unfit. They can't without my consent. They can if they claim you're a danger. Bull sat down. I'm sorry. I thought we had more time. It's not over. Not unless we have hard evidence. Sarah thought about the recorder. What if I could get Hayes to confess? Bull looked at her sharply. That's impossible. He's too smart. Not if he thinks he's won. Not if he thinks I'm broken. Sarah's mind raced. They want me to take their deal. What if I agree? What if I tell Hayes I'll take it? He'll never believe you. He will if I look defeated. Sarah held up the recorder. And when he comes to finalize the deal, I get him talking. Get him to admit what he did. Bull was quiet. This is dangerous. If Hayes suspects you're recording, he won't just discharge you, he'll make you disappear. I know. Your father took this same risk, and it got him killed. I know that too. Sarah met his eyes. But someone has to stand up. If not me, then who? Bull stood slowly. Your father said something similar. I told him to be careful. He said some things were more important. What did you say? I said he was right. Then I watched him die because I wasn't brave enough to stand with him. Bull put a hand on her shoulder. I'm not making that mistake twice. Whatever you need, I'm with you. Even if it costs everything? I've got 2 years until retirement. Maybe it's time I followed my conscience. Sarah felt tears threatening. Thank you, Bull. Don't thank me yet. Hayes is smart. He might not take the bait. Then we'll find another way, but we have to try. Bull nodded. Get some rest. You need to look broken tomorrow. Defeated. Can you do that? Sarah thought about 3 days of interrogation, about her father's dead eyes. Yeah, I can do that. Sarah sat in Hayes's office. She'd been awake 72 hours. Her uniform was wrinkled, her hair unwashed, her eyes hollow. She looked broken. Hayes sat behind his desk. General Blackwood stood by the window. Commander Raines sat to Sarah's left. Chief Mitchell, Hayes began gently, we've completed our evaluation. The findings are concerning. Sarah said nothing. The recorder was in her pocket, active, recording everything. The assessment indicates you're suffering from complicated grief disorder with delusional features. Without treatment, you pose a risk. I just want it to stop, Sarah whispered. I know, and we want to help. Hayes leaned forward. We're prepared to offer honorable discharge with full benefits. Psychiatric care at a civilian facility. All we ask is that you sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding any investigations. There it was. Silence in exchange for freedom. Sarah looked up slowly. What investigations? Hayes and Blackwood exchanged a glance. The general stepped forward. We know you've been looking into your father's death, accessing classified files, making inquiries. We understand why. You wanted answers, but there's nothing to find. Your father died in combat, not a conspiracy. You're lying. The words came out stronger than intended. Sarah softened her voice. I mean, I thought you were lying, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just wanted someone to blame. That's natural, Rain said, but it's not healthy. You need to let it go. If I sign your papers, if I stop investigating, it really ends? I can have my life back? Yes, Hayes said. You can put this behind you. Honor your father's memory by living well, not chasing ghosts. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay, where do I sign? Hayes pulled out a document, started to slide it across, then stopped. One more thing. A full accounting of everyone you spoke to about Panama. Every person, every file. Why? To ensure the investigation is closed, to make sure no one else wastes time. Hayes smiled. Full disclosure, then you're free. This was the moment. I spoke to Commander Elizabeth Chen at NCIS, Sarah said slowly. She authorized my investigation. She has copies of all the evidence. Hayes's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched. What evidence? Financial records showing wire transfers from a Cayman Islands account to military officers, including you. The transfers correspond to weapons shipments that went missing in Panama, shipments that ended up with cartels. That's a serious accusation. It's documented fact. Chen has the banking records, the shipping manifests, testimony from 3 witnesses who were in Panama. Sarah leaned forward. My father found it first. That's why you killed him. The room went quiet. Blackwood's face had gone pale. You're making wild accusations based on delusions. Am I? Because you look scared. Hayes stood abruptly. This conversation is over. Commander Rains, place Chief Mitchell under psychiatric hold. She's clearly experiencing a psychotic break. No psychotic break, Sarah said calmly. Just truth. My father uncovered your corruption. He was going to report it. So you arranged his death, made it look like combat casualties. But he left evidence. Evidence I found. Evidence that's going to destroy you. You have no evidence, Hayes said. You're bluffing. Then why are you sweating? Why is the general pale? Why are you so desperate to make me sign that agreement? Sarah pulled out the recorder, set it on the desk. And why have you spent the last 5 minutes confessing to everything on tape? Hayes stared at the recorder. That's inadmissible. You can't record military proceedings without authorization. True, but I can record evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. Obstruction of justice. All felonies. You stupid girl, Blackwood hissed. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I've proven my father was murdered. By you. And now you're going to pay. Hayes moved fast. His hand went to his sidearm. Sarah had been expecting it. She rolled left as he drew. The bullet meant for her head hit the wall. The office door burst open. Bull Torres came through first, followed by 4 military police officers. Drop the weapon, Bull shouted. Hayes's gun swung toward Bull. More MPs flooded in. Blackwood tried to run. He made it 3 steps before 2 MPs tackled him. Hayes stood alone, gun in hand, surrounded. He looked at Sarah. Your father was weak. He couldn't understand that sometimes rules have to be broken. My father understood that honor matters, that truth matters, that being a soldier means protecting people, not exploiting them. Sarah's voice was steel. You're not a soldier. You're a criminal in a uniform. And now everyone knows it. Hayes's hand trembled. For a moment, Sarah thought he might try suicide by cop. Instead, he lowered the weapon, let it drop, raised his hands. The MPs moved in, cuffed both Hayes and Blackwood, read them their rights. It was over. 7 years of searching, 3 days of interrogation, and finally, justice. Bull Torres approached. Your father would be proud. Is it enough? Will the recording hold up? With Hayes drawing a weapon on you in front of witnesses, with Blackwood trying to flee, with the financial records Chen has, yeah, it's enough. Bull put a hand on her shoulder. You did it, Sarah. You proved he was murdered. You brought them to justice. Sarah nodded. She should feel victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. Commander Rains approached. Chief Mitchell, I owe you an apology. I was following orders, but that doesn't excuse participating in psychological torture. Were you part of the conspiracy? No, I thought I was conducting a legitimate evaluation. I didn't know Hayes was trying to break you to protect himself. Rains looked ashamed. For what it's worth, your eval scores were perfect. If Hayes hadn't pushed for false conclusions, my report would have recommended you for advanced training. Sarah almost laughed. After 3 days of hell, she'd passed. What happens now? Bull asked. Now, NCIS takes over. Full investigation, military trial, probably civilian charges too. Bull looked at Sarah. And you get to decide what you want to do next. I want to finish what I started here. I want to train the next generation, teach them what my father taught me, that honor isn't just a word, that truth matters, that being a warrior means standing up for what's right, even when it costs everything. Bull smiled. I think that can be arranged. Fort Bragg needs good instructors, real ones. They walked out into the morning sun. Fort Bragg was coming alive. Soldiers running PT, instructors preparing for training. They found Victor Tank Moreno at the outdoor range. Chief Mitchell, he said, stood up, came to attention. At ease, Moreno. I wanted to apologize for the equipment room, for attacking you. I was wrong. I was following Blackwood because I thought his connections could help my career. You learn from it? Yes, ma'am. The evaluation made me think about who I want to be. Sarah studied him, saw genuine remorse. My father used to say that warriors aren't born. They're made through choices. Every day you choose who you want to be. What choice should I make tomorrow? Choose truth. Choose honor. Choose to stand up even when it's hard. Tank nodded. Will you train me? Will you teach me what your father taught you? Sarah considered. This man had attacked her, but he was genuinely trying to change. Her father would have given him a chance. Yeah, I'll train you, but fair warning, I'm harder than any instructor you've had. Good. I don't want easy. I want to earn it. Then report to my office Monday morning. 0600. Don't be late. Tank saluted. Sarah returned it. He walked away different than the man who'd thrown that punch. Bull watched him go. You're going to make a good instructor. I learned from the best. The training class stood at attention. 20 new candidates, fresh, eager. Sarah walked down the line, Master Chief Bull Torres beside her. She wore her instructor uniform now, earned through 6 months of rebuilding Fort Bragg's training program. Ethan Cole stood at the end of the line, no longer a candidate, now an assistant instructor. He'd earned his SEAL Trident 3 months ago, top of his class. My name is Chief Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell, she said, her voice carrying. Some of you know my story. Some heard about what happened here 6 months ago. Some enrolled specifically because of it. She paused, let her eyes move across each candidate. I don't care why you're here. I care what you do while you're here. I care whether you have the integrity to be honest when lying would be easier. Whether you have the courage to stand up when sitting down would be safer. Whether you have the strength to do what's right when everyone around you is doing what's convenient. My father, Colonel Robert Mitchell, believed that being a warrior wasn't about physical strength. It was about moral strength. It was about choosing truth over comfort, honor over advancement, duty over self. He died for those beliefs, murdered by men who wore the same uniform but didn't share the same values. Men who are now in federal prison where they belong. Sarah pulled out her father's challenge coin, the one he'd carried through dozens of operations. This coin represents a promise to uphold the values that make us more than just trained killers, a promise to protect the innocent, a promise to stand for truth, a promise to be worthy of the uniform we wear. She held it up. By the time you graduate this program, You'll earn your own coin. But earning it isn't about passing tests. It's about proving that when everything is on the line, when your career is threatened, when powerful people want you to stay silent, you have the strength to do what's right anyway. Some of you will fail, not because you're weak, but because you're not ready. There's no shame in that. The shame is in pretending to be something you're not. Sarah put the coin away. Training starts tomorrow. 0600, dismissed. The candidates dispersed. Bull approached. Your father would be proud. That was a hell of a speech. I borrowed most of it from him. I remember. I was there. Bull's expression grew somber. He knew he might not make it back. He knew Hayes and Blackwood were dangerous, but he gave that speech anyway. Do you think he knew that they were going to kill him? I think he suspected, but he went anyway, because that's who Robert Mitchell was. Sarah nodded. I used to be angry at him for that, for choosing duty over staying alive, over staying with me. But now I understand. Some things are more important than survival. Like truth. Like truth. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Commander Chen at NCIS. Trial date set. Hayes and Blackwood both facing life sentences. Your testimony will be crucial. Are you ready? Sarah typed back, I've been ready for 7 years. She looked up at the Fort Bragg sky. Clear, blue, infinite. Somewhere, she liked to think her father was watching. I did it, Dad, she whispered. I finished what you started. And now I'm going to make sure no one ever has to go through what we went through. I'm going to teach them better. The wind carried her words away. Bull pretended not to notice the tears. Come on, we've got work to do. New class starts tomorrow. Just like my father did. Just like your father did. They walked into the building together. Instructor and mentor. Daughter and father's friend. Two people united by grief and purpose and determination to make sure Robert Mitchell's sacrifice meant something. Behind them, the sun set over Fort Bragg. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new candidates, new opportunities to teach what it meant to be warriors. But tonight, Sarah Mitchell could rest knowing she'd honored her father's memory in the most important way possible. Not with revenge, not with violence, but with truth, with justice, with the promise to carry forward everything he'd stood for. Some battles choose you. When they do, you fight, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything. Sarah Mitchell had fought and won, not just for herself, but for every soldier who would come after her, every person who needed someone to stand up when standing up was dangerous. Her father's legacy lived on, in her, in Bull, in Ethan Cole, in Tank Moreno, in every student who would learn what honor looked like. The 12 seconds in the equipment room had started everything, but it was the months that followed that truly mattered. The investigation, the interrogation, the trial, the rebuilding, and now the teaching. Sarah Mitchell had proven she was her father's daughter, a warrior, a leader, a guardian of truth in a world that often preferred comfortable lies. And she was just getting started.